S.O. Gillingham was a trapper from Newfoundland who crossed the Straits of Belle Isle regularly into Labrador. There's been a few takes on the story, but here are the two most popular. So, selling the skins of the animals he hunted didn't pay as much as S.O. thought it would, so he resorted to other tactics to make the money he needed. He decided to sell illegal booze inside of a deep spruce forest in Labrador. This booze was an atrocious mix of yeast, sugar, and spruce pine cones. He called this mixture Smoke, later earning him the nickname Smoker. The other take is that S.O. was an exceptional trapper, and the skins that he got would actually bring lots of money into the town because of this. But S.O. was also known to be a misogynistic, angry man. He would often pick fights with townsmen after selling his booze to the local native people. He would assault local women. He would always be drunk. The money that he brought in from the skins was the only thing that convinced people to keep him around. But eventually, his drunken side would become too much for them, and he would eventually get kicked out of town. Along with that, the RCMP ended up discovering his illegal distillery, and, well, enough said. S.O. was brought to jail, and his business had been destroyed. S.O. was sentenced to 1 year in jail before being released. But instead of going back to a normal life of trapping after being released, S.O. had different plans. Not wanting to go back to a life of where he struggled with financial uncertainty, he immediately after being released from jail began work to make sure he would never be caught again. Trappers and many other people in Labrador would often use a wooden sled drawn by dogs called a komatik to get around, especially inside of really snowy areas. So S.O., that's what he traveled on regularly before going to jail. So after getting out, he painted his komatik white and then acquired a full team of white husky dogs, whether he stole them or he bargained for them, and he had somewhere between 8 and 14 of them. And he also wore a suit of all white fur. This was all to keep him camouflaged inside of the snow so the RCMP couldn't find him. And this plan would prove successful, as RCMP were never able to catch him, even after several attempts. Eventually though, S.O. would meet his death, though nobody would know when and how. Some say he got lost in a bad snowstorm and froze to death. Some say in a drunken stupor, he fell off of a fish flake, which is a sort of platform built on poles to dry out codfish in Newfoundland and Labrador. And after falling from this fish flake, he broke his back. Laying in the freezing cold for days, unable to move, he eventually froze to death. And there's another story that even recounts that S.O. was in pursuit of romance with a local innkeeper's wife, and he got shot to death by her disgruntled husband. Some say he even died of old age and just died peacefully, alone in the trail with his dogs. Legend has it, to this day, the cold Labrador winds are every so often joined by the sound of a trapper and his dog team running through the night. A few have seen his ghost, and it is said to be a harrowing sight, yet he is not known to be an entity who is roaming the woods to put harm into innocent people passing by. No, the sight of him is actually known to be life-saving. They say his soul was condemned to roam the earth forever, saving lives to pay for his wrongdoings while he was alive. The most popular encounter with the ghost of Gillingham was when a man with a dog team was lost in a blizzard. When suddenly, another trapper with his dog team, all in white, they came along and guided him to the shelter of some fishermen's winter huts in Frenchman's Island. As they arrived, they could see a fisherman standing in an open doorway. So the man stopped his dogs and he cried, "Thank you," to the trapper in all white, who was continuing on with his team past the village back into the woods. The fisherman in the hut, thinking that the man is talking to him, replies, "Oh, you're certainly welcome." But confused by this, the man corrects him and says, "Oh, I was actually talking to that good man driving off over there. He was the one who guided me here when I was lost." And then the fisherman replies, "There was no other person there besides you." Another well-known story about this ghost is when a lost trapper had found himself caught in a terrible blizzard far out in the woods from any towns. As he struggled to find shelter in the vicious storm, the Phantom Trapper appeared with his coma tick. The Phantom lifted the nearly dying man, placed him on his coma tick, and drove him to the nearest town. The Phantom carried the man right into the inn, placed him gently on a chair by the door, and called for the innkeeper to take care of the man. And then, he vanished right before the man's eyes. In a CBC article in 2020 by Jen White, a man named Richard Neville describes him and his father's experiences with this ghost growing up in Labrador. Neville's father's experience was in the Porcupine Bay area in the 1950s. While Neville's dad and his friend were at their cabin cutting wood, they suddenly hear a loud crack, almost like it was a whip. And then he thought he heard a pack of dogs and a man shouting. So his friend and him decided that they gotta get out of there quickly, because that is definitely Old Smoker. After making it home, about half an hour later, whiteout conditions began outside. And Neville had his own experience with this ghost too when he was only 8 years old. He was out late at a friend's house one night when a man who was at the house told him, "You better get home, boy. Old Smoker's gonna be out soon." So Neville started walking home. And during his walk, the wind started to pick up. And not long into it, Neville heard the sound of a crack. He said, "It can't be. Is that really?" And the sound of the whip happened again. So Neville began to sprint all the ways home, even tripping up a few times, but he didn't stop to look behind him, even once. As soon as he got home, he told his father about what happened, and he said, "Yeah, he's out there trying to get you home, he was. Old Smoker." The life-saving Phantom Trapper's story is one of the most famous ghost stories in Labrador and is held as a proud piece of folklore. This story was fictionalized in the 1972 novel White Eskimo, a novel of Labrador. Whether the story gets told through text or through oral tradition, it is sure to live on for many years to come. So if you are traveling through the cold forests of Labrador and you hear the sound of a whip or a man with a team of dogs, consider yourself lucky, because you may have just been saved from a life-threatening snowstorm. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Bizarre Newfoundland. If you guys like this video and you want to hear another creepy story from Newfoundland and Labrador, you can click up in the top left corner and it'll bring you right there. But that's it for this episode of Bizarre Newfoundland. I am your host, Cody O'Quinn, and I will see you guys next time. Well, hopefully